Now, another reason the church might be losing support in Latin America is its history of supporting military dictatorships in the past. The Catholic Church supported the brutal regime of Pinochet in Chile. Dictatorships in Honduras and Guatemala also received support from the Catholic Church. In Mexico, the church held close ties to the Institutional Revolutionary Party, which has a long history of dictatorship. And it tacitly supported the so-called dirty war of the 1970s and 80s in Argentina. Well, joining us now is Blase Bonpane. He's a former priest and director of the Office of the Americas, a non-profit organization based in California. He joins us live from Santa Monica. Thank you very much, Mr. Bonpane, for being on Al Jazeera. So it's unclear, really, whether there were direct dirty dealings between the new Pope and the dictatorship in Argentina. But what is clear is that there was complicity between the church and military dictatorships in many countries in Latin America. If you could tell us first, why is that? Why did the church support these dictatorships? Was it just out of fear, or were there other reasons?
Well, it goes all the way back to the Nicene Council of 325 AD that the church became subservient to the empire, in that case to the Roman Empire. And that subservience turned into a very muscular Christianity with the Crusades and the Inquisition and the conquistadores. And the kings of Spain named every bishop in Latin America from 1492 until the 19th century. So this subservience has been long-standing. And the book written in Argentina called El Silencio is about the silence of the church, which they called duplicity, because silence is complicity. And the complicity of the church with the death of 30,000 Argentines. Very little was said while that was going on, and in some cases there were accusations that priests who were rejected by the hierarchy because of their liberation theology were picked up by the death squads, and in 2 cases they came back alive, and one of them gave his report on how he was treated, and he said he thought it was because he was outside of the regular conservative theology, teaching liberation theology.
So what do we know then about the dealings of the new Pope, who's a Jesuit, with the dictatorship in Argentina in the 1970s? Is it clear what sort of role he had?
Well, yes, we know that they were communicating. We know that there were people brought to his island refuge that were said to be prisoners and were also said to be taken there so that UN forces, UN presence would not see them as prisoners. Now that would have to be verified. That's part and parcel of the book and of the journalism that has been written at the time. So they were in communication, but there was very little opposition. And this is true. You may say, even if you look at the United States, have our bishops opposed Guantanamo? Have they really spoken out against it? Have they, so we do find this relationship between the church and the state in much of the world. And this is not unusual in Argentina. We had a similar situation with Augusto Pinochet Ugarte in Chile.
Right.
He was communicative with the church. So it is not a happy history. There are exceptions, and exceptions like Archbishop Oscar Arnulfo Romero of El Salvador, who was basically canonized by the people because he stood up to the government.
In the case of Argentina, the church in 2000 made a direct apology for failing to take a stand against the generals. Have they been able to move away from that dark period? Did they redeem themselves in the eyes of Argentinians?
Well, I certainly hope so, because the apologies have been made. Pope John Paul II made apologies for some of church history and said how shocked he was at what was done in the name of God. And yes, an apology in the year 2000 in Argentina, and of course a focus of the new Pope on the poor of Argentina and his own simplicity of life, together with a very conservative theology and the threat, you may say, of liberation theology is still there, because the people want to see governance from the base in the church and in the state. In the case of Hugo Chavez, who just died, he had a preferential option for the poor as head of state. And that is what the church, the Liberation Church, has been asking for, to give your preferential option for the poor, not for the rich, not for those who are very affluent. So the last... Go ahead, please.
Sorry, I was just going to ask you, because you've mentioned this, the relationship between the Roman Catholic Church and right-wing regimes, including dictatorships in Europe and the Americas, whether it's Mussolini in Italy, has been the subject of controversy for a number of decades now. Do you think anything is likely to change now that we have a pope that's from a different part of the world? Are we likely to see the church become more vocal, perhaps?
It will change by virtue of voices coming from the base. Now, Brazil had hundreds of thousands of base communities. They want their will to be heard and responded to at the top. And they want, it's strange, but this applies to politics and to the church. It's not union of church and state. It's union of church and ethics, and state and ethics. And this is what we see in the new Latin American Renaissance in Brazil, in Bolivia, in Venezuela, in Ecuador. It's really striking. In Uruguay, throughout Latin America, we see a great renaissance, and I think that the church will go along, but it has been quite reluctant in the past. Historically, we cannot defend much that was done in the name of God.
Okay, thank you so much for your insight. Thank you for talking to us. Blaise Bonpane joining us live from Santa Monica in California.
Thank you.